you have a cell phone that has the same power as the mainframe did 25 years ago, and it's in your pocket.
Welcome to Homes That Heal, the podcast that transforms your life and home into a sanctuary of health, healing, and happiness. Hi, I'm Jen Heller, a wellness educator, infrared sauna expert, and your guide to living intentionally. Each week, we'll explore a variety of wellness tools, along with detoxification, weight loss, and anti-aging tips to boost your energy and align your mind and body so you can thrive in life, not just survive. Your health is your wealth, and it all starts at home. Let's dive in and create a home that heals. Hey friends, Jen here. Welcome back to Homes That Heal. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm excited and grateful to connect with you this week. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that I get asked about literally every day, and that's EMF exposure, 5G radiation. How does it affect our health? Why does it affect our health? And the overarching question, how can you protect yourself inside your home? So the constant and ever-increasing exposure to electromagnetic frequencies, otherwise known as EMF radiation, emitted by cell phones, tablets, laptops, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth is one of the most critical health issues I think our society is facing today. Researchers have found associations between EMF exposure and neurological degeneration, DNA damage in tumors, and problems with the nervous, immune, and reproductive systems. Health outcomes linked to EMF exposure range from insomnia and ADHD, plus memory and focus problems, to mental illness, chronic disease, cancer, and more. Studies also indicate that EMF radiation is especially harmful to our developing children, and many of whom begin using wireless communication devices, or at least exposed to, before they even learn to talk. And many are exposed to this radiation while still in the womb. I'm incredibly grateful to dig into this important conversation today with my guest, Daniel DeBaun, who is the co-founder of DefenderShield. 5G is the newest and fastest cellular network being deployed around the world, and DeBaun and many other scientists and researchers are really weary of the negative biological impacts this higher frequency wave might have on humans, animals, crops, and our entire ecosystem. Even though EMFs emitted from mobile devices and cell towers can cause biological changes in our body, DeBaun says that doesn't necessarily mean that we must give up our gadgets. Fortunately, there are simple and effective steps we can take to minimize risks posed by EMF emissions, and we explain those steps today, as well as they're located on their website and in his book. Daniel DeBaun is an internationally recognized expert in EMF radiation, EMF shielding, and EMF-related health issues, with a special focus on the effect of exposure from mobile devices, such as laptops, tablets, and cell phones. DeBaun's concern regarding the health impact on EMF emissions grew from over 30 years of engineering experience in the telecommunication industry, where he held a variety of executive positions at SAIC, Telcordia, AT&T, and Bell Labs. Daniel is the co-founder and chairman of DefenderShield, a company known as the trusted worldwide expert in EMF radiation education and protection. He also authored a book called Radiation Nation: The Fallout of Modern Technology. Radiation Nation is an easy-to-understand book that is the ultimate layman's guide for those looking to educate themselves on the science of EMF, EMF health risks and research, and ways to protect yourself and your families. Daniel graciously sent me a copy of his book so I could take a closer look before we met today, and I highly, highly recommend it. You guys, this is a really important topic that can often feel a bit overwhelming, but I invite you to listen, take some notes if need be, and think through what steps you can take inside your home and inside your life. I'm really grateful for his time and wisdom today, so please welcome Daniel DeBaun to the show.
I appreciate you calling me.
My pleasure. I called and I wanted to connect with you for two very important reasons. One, you're an expert. This is your wheelhouse. You've been in this lane for many, many years. And so I like to go right to the source of this, for one. And you're really passionate about education and just educating people on this. So that's
Yep.
really important to me in my community. But also, I think this is one of the most important conversations. And I talk about EMF radiation or EMF exposure on my show all the time because we're all surrounded by this technology. We're
Yes, we
all
are.
inundated with this energy coming at us, this frequency. And more, as we'll dig into, information is coming out just how detrimental it is to our bodies, it is to our health, and it is to what I quite frankly say our longevity, as far
Hmm.
as the longevity of our life. It's affecting a lot of things. And so I wanted to highlight this again. I know I've talked about this a lot on the show, but you have a fantastic book about it, Radiation Nation, which I'm just a few chapters into it. I'm already just like enamored by it, um, because of the amount of information and reminders that it's bringing forth. Um, but I want to start. I think I wrote down something that I saw that you quoted, and I actually want to read it because I think it really just encompasses what we're going to talk about today. So
Okay.
I'm actually going to just read this. So researchers have found associations between EMF exposure and neurological degeneration, DNA damage in tumors, and the problems with the nervous system, immune system, and reproductive systems. Health outcomes linked to EMF exposure range from insomnia, ADHD, memory and focus to mental illness, chronic disease states, cancer, and more. That's a lot. That's a
It
big
is.
statement. And that's why I wanted to read it because I think that affects almost everybody. Wouldn't you agree?
It certainly does. Actually, was that from the book?
Yes. Yep. And it's
Okay.
also, I believe, on your site too. But yeah, that's from the book.
Yeah, that was written several years ago when I wrote the book. And at that time, um, I didn't really have a, a real understanding before I wrote the book, a real understanding what the issues were. But a few years earlier, I had been in the telecom business for years and years. I wrote the standards for telecom businesses. I tested technology for the network compliance. So I was pretty knowledgeable
Mm.
about the subject matter and never considered myself electromagnetic radiation expert. But I dealt with it all the time. And I'll tell you a story. My my adult sons were visiting. They had their laptops in their lap, and my wife comes along and says, "I want grandchildren. Get it off your lap." And I said, "The power levels are so low. There's no way there can be interference with the human body with the energy levels being at that level." But, I thought about it a little bit and I realized I had never really looked at the scientific side, the medical community side of it. I was always on the technology side. So I started looking into it a little bit. And lo and behold, even 12, 13, 14 years ago, whatever it was, um, there was known mobility reductions in the male sperm by up to 25% after 3 or 4 hours worth of use. So there
Oh
were
my God.
studies even back then.
Whoa, really?
And it turns out that was not the only source of impacts that we had been looking at from a medical community point of view. There was lots and lots and lots of evidence, but yet, Jan, none of us knew it. I was in the business and I didn't know it. So that actually prompted us to start trying to help my sons.
Yeah.
I literally went and I built a literally a pad that was a shielding pad
Mhm.
from the RF signal, the microwave signal that comes
Mhm.
from a laptop connecting to the router. And I made them. They were crude prototypes, and I gave it to them. And I was surprised they actually started using it. And then their friends saw that. So I made a couple for them. And
Mhm.
literally, we started by building something just to protect my sons and have grandchildren, which of course I don't
Yeah.
have yet. But
Oh,
that's another story.
that's a story for another day. I think,
Right.
that's why I love your overarching ability to see this from, like, the 30,000-foot view is you are
Yeah.
on the side of the communication side. You come
Yeah.
from a very unique, perspective and piece of the you know the frequency,
Right.
um, but also, finding a solution to fix something and help your family. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, every great business was either, built or born in a basement or a garage, somewhere
Yeah.
in our home with a very, loving intention to create something that helps your family. And
Yeah.
so, that's what really struck me about this whole situation. Like, that's how this was born. That's how DefenderShield was born, correct? You and your
It
son
was,
Ryan?
yeah. Literally, it
Yeah.
was from that. And then when I had to create technologies that shielded a variety of levels of frequency rates.
Mhm,
It's just not the RF signal; it was the extremely low frequency signal that's coming from the power that you
mhm,
had. So it was a complicated design. But then I was reading an article about um, these parents that were being badgered by the daughter, 16-year-old daughter, to use to get a cell phone. And they finally broke down and they gave her a cell phone. And she used it incessantly for over a year. And then after a year, they found a frontal lobe cancer in her brain. And that really disturbed me because I know there was references in science that showed correlation. But there was an article I was reading that was very personal. And I said, I know the shielding that I created for the laptop will also work for a cell phone. And now all of a sudden I started building products for cell phones. And that's how we actually started building upon building
mhm,
to try to help people that choose to um, conclude that there may be things they maybe can do that
mhm.
can help them with their environmental, the environment they live in
Right,
and using the technologies they want to use.
right. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge, and I think that's where people get really frustrated and kind of almost in the analysis paralysis in this deep well of information because I think most people can agree that we know this technology, especially as it's evolved over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Now we've got 5G towers in the middle of, you can drive into any neighborhood, any rural neighborhood all over city. I'm in southern Wisconsin. I'm just outside of Madison. um, any one of these developed areas has these towers everywhere now, as well as almost every company from stoves, refrigerators to, I sell saunas, like all these smart devices,
Right.
everything is all around us. And so, it's like, what can we do? Because unless you want to throw it all away and go live in the mountains or just like really truly get off the grid, which is interesting, a lot of people are doing,
Yeah, they
moving,
are.
we moved out of the city 6 years ago because, well, for a variety of reasons, but because people are becoming attuned to this. So, one of the questions that I want to chat about specifically is, you talked about the laptops and phones. Those are two very common things that people are using every day, but particularly 5G. What do you wanna say about, I don't wanna say the dangers of that, but, like, it's interesting to me because I'm thinking, like, why is this stuff developed? Like,
Right.
what's the purpose? Why is it there if it's causing so many problems?
So uh, let's look at history a tiny bit. Uh, when I worked in Bell Labs um, years ago, there was a mainframe that was down the hall, and it had a lot of emissions from that mainframe. And none of us at that time had cell phones. And if you did have a cell phone, chances are you didn't have anybody to call because no one could afford a cell phone. And so we had this technology that began emerging 20 years ago, a little older than that. And it was all fairly sparingly used around our bodies. And then all of a sudden, as time went on, as technologies evolved, those technologies came closer and closer and closer to us. Today, you have a cell phone, a laptop, or a cell phone that has the same power as the mainframe did 20, 25 years ago, and it's in your pocket. And so all of a sudden, where no one was exposed to technology, typically at close range, up to 98% are radiated with technology around them every day. And it's only been over the last 10 or 15 years that migration really occurred so rapidly. So that's the first part about it. It's not new. AM radio was transmitting a radio signal years ago, and we listened to the radio, but we weren't sitting on top of antennas.
Right.
And that was sort of the difference. So as the technology evolved, and I'll talk specifically about cell phones as it relates to 5G, but I'll give a background history a tiny bit. When you have a signal, a transmitted signal from any technology around us, it moves at a frequency rate. And so 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. So it goes past 1 point in a second, and that's 1 cycle. It's a wave. When you talk about extremely low frequency, the stuff we use in the wall, the AC that's coming out of the wall in our bed, in our houses, in our bedrooms, it's about 60 hertz, 60 cycles per second. And so there's actually energy being emitted, electromagnetic radiation energy that's being emitted from the walls. So that's one form of electromagnetic radiation, the stuff that comes out of your walls, if from the AC from our house. And then if you go up faster on a cell phone, roughly today, cell phones operate about 1 gigahertz, which means 1 billion cycles in 1 second. So it's going really fast.
Holy smokes, yeah.
And what's different today than, say, 5-10 years ago, we had, and you don't need to remember the details, it was an analog signal. It was like a constant load against your body when you used the cell phone. But today, it's a digital signal. It's a pulsing signal. So it's 1 cycle. It's 1 billion cycles in 1 second, but it's pulsing. It's going on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. And so all of a sudden, that technology that we had created 10, 15, 20 years ago has evolved and become a digital signal that pulses. And we know there's a huge amount of scientific evidence, well-structured testing at so many levels that demonstrate that there is a biological impact from a cell phone kind of transmission, which, by the way, is not only a RF signal, a radio frequency signal, it's also a microwave signal.
Yeah.
So what is a microwave signal? A microwave signal is something that the power that's being generated is enough power to heat up your body. How does it work? When you put a piece of meat into a microwave oven, it works at about 2.3 gigahertz. And the water is heated up between the cells. The cells are oscillating really, really fast. And all of a sudden, the meat's cooked. Well, guess what? An RF signal, a microwave signal from your cell phone at 1 gigahertz does that. It has an impact. But the standard for that cell phone. It was over 35 years ago. And it would only look at the thermal impact. What do I mean by that? Well, when you put a cell phone to your head to a 6-foot male, the standard allows the area around this transmitted signal to heat up by 2 degrees. By 2 degrees, right? And so, penetrate a thick-headed male by about 1 inch to 2 inches. Well, all the scientific evidence I just spoke about, the plethora of scientific evidence, is the biological impact. So the standards were never considering the influence to the frontal lobe to mutate or DNA damage the cell in the frontal lobe. It only looked for heating. It didn't look for the standard to protect you from the biological. And that's why when you hear about the microwave signal, the RF signal, you get concerned, because we do now know the biological impact is far more important than the thermal impact. Now, I'm going to talk about 5G now. Now that we fully understand the cell phone, let's go to 5G. What 5G does is just another iteration of improved telecommunications. The theory is to help you be more complete with the functions you need. In other words, when a cell phone came out, the only thing it did, it dialed and you talked to someone on the other end. That was all a phone did. Today, you send email, you send messages, you send all sorts of stuff. So the complicated evolution has allowed us to do more and more things. With 5G, it's supposed to be able to allow you to connect to everything. It allows you to have standards for communications, but it also allows you to put more data into the network. So rather than waiting 5-10 minutes for a movie to download, it's done in seconds, because the speed, remember, billion cycles per second is pretty fast. And so with 5G signals, the frequency rates of the signals, a lot of them are similar to what's being used today with a cell phone. What's different, and here's the part where there's some concern, is that they're starting to increase the frequency rate of data transfer. And so it's not only 1 gigahertz, it's 20 gigahertz, 20 billion cycles per second. It actually goes up to 300 gigahertz, which is 300 billion cycles per second for 5G. 6G goes into the terahertz space, much, 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 much faster. Why what you hear are people concerned about is that we don't know anything about it.
Right.
We just don't know. We don't have evidence. It hasn't been around long enough to have any understanding of the body impact. The RF signal has been around long enough that there was sufficient testing, and there's been sufficient evidence in the marketplace about the impacts that are pretty well known and understood. But with 5G at the higher rates, there's no understanding of what it means. And what do I mean by understanding? Well, when you talk about 1 gigahertz, we talked about mutating a cell, but it also has the ability to modify the gut behavior. For example, when you have an RF signal go into your gut, it changes the microbiome function to some extent. And if you get really highly sensitive to the cell phone environment, the technology environment we live in, considering hypersensitivity, that actually is a change of the gut from the RF signal. And when you use a cell phone to your head, believe it or not, the blood-brain barrier that's protecting your head is reduced. It's suppressed. So it allows foreign objects, environmental toxins, to actually penetrate. Typically it wouldn't. So it's the unknown characteristics of 5G in the future that really is more concerning than anything else.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's like, okay, well, how long does it take to gather that data or that information?
Right.
And, what kind of detrimental effects happen along the way? I think, particularly for myself, I'm a grown woman, I can make changes in my home, we can do different things. What I think is particularly interesting and alarming is, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, so I'm
Yeah.
dating myself. I'm 45. No issue saying
Right.
that. But the generation below me, right? Like kids,
Yeah.
just they grew up with devices in their hands and these
Yeah,
smart
exactly.
devices, the impact that tablets have, smart devices, even cell phones. I mean,
Right.
kids get cell phones for a variety of reasons. Like, I understand the safety and the communication. We live in an interesting world, where parents obviously want to be more tethered and connected to their children,
Right.
particularly at school and things. But kids, teenagers, young adults walking around with these things in their pockets, in their face constantly, like, that's where some of these devices or this gear, these tools that you've created are just so important, because if you're going to use them that often, protect yourself. So
Yeah.
what type of, yeah, I
Jen,
know, like,
let me give you an example
okay,
based on the information we just spoke about the standard. It does not look at the biological, as I mentioned, but I did say that it penetrates male by 1 to 2 inches and heats up
yeah,
no more than 2 degrees. That represents currently in today's use 3% of the population. Women, your skull is not as thick as mine. You've told me that many times. I'm a thick skull. Uh, uh,
now I
but
know there's proof when I say that to Mark. Okay, thank you. My husband. Get it through
and
your thicker skull.
right, you're a thick skulled. You're a 5-year-old child. When they have a cell phone to the head, that signal goes completely through their head.
Oh my gosh.
So you need to be aware that if you think the standard is going to be protecting you, the standards for currently the technology deployed today is 30 some odd years old. And it maybe really doesn't do quite the job it should be doing. And certainly from scientific testing, we know that there's that danger with those exposures to the younger and younger and younger. With a 5-year-old child, for example, there's the membranes it's soft tissue, very, very soft
Right.
tissue. And that's why it's so easily penetrated by the technologies. So as you were pointing out, um, it is a good idea to think about the technologies you have in your environment and then taking maybe some actions to reduce exposures that improves the impact to your children using technologies. Uh, and by the way, simply not using it is a good idea.
Right.
Using it
It's
just for a couple of minutes, you're never going
right.
to die. It's the when you
Exactly.
use it a long time that it becomes a problem.
Exactly. I think one of the things, I mean, the show Homes That Heal, when we moved out here to the country 5, 6 years ago, the point was to create what we call it Heller Haven, but really a sanctuary space,
Right.
and like really dial into conscious design around our home,
Yes.
particularly our sleep environment, which I think is really important. And so, again, I like to hone in on, like, the reality is we're going to use cell phones. The reality is
Right.
we're going to use earbuds. The reality is I work off of a laptop and this technology to produce this show. But what can we do inside our homes to create environments where it gives our bodies a break, particularly in our resting space? And so what I've done is really just kind of created the ecosystem in our bedroom is like, there's no technology in there, literally none. Like, there's no phones, there's no TV, there are no, even our alarm clock is like the old school. I have it's called the sunrise clock, plugs into the wall. battery operated if you need, if it back up, like really kind of go back to basics in your sleeping environment, because that's when we're resting and restoring. And I'm not suggesting that our day-to-day operation, like we can just be inundated with all these things, but I really feel strongly about when we're going to sleep at night, we're getting those 6, 8, 9 hours of sleep and allowing the body to breathe and reset. That has to be safe and protected. So I hone in on this. I talk about it all the time, but I'd love for you to talk through about the importance of you'd mentioned small children and their sleep, and you've got kids with ADHD and all these ranges of chronic illness in small children and young adults. And everyone's asking, like, why? Where's this coming from?
Right.
Well, I think it really has to do with the environment in which we're living.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you agree?
it's considered a toxin. So,
Yeah.
Jen, I agree with you. You and I are not going to the moon very soon.
No.
We have to sort of deal with this because we're not going anywhere. And so
I wouldn't rule anything out, Dan. I would go to the moon if somebody asked me. I'm pretty fearless. That's not off the table for me. But I hear what you're saying.
I love the idea you talk about the sanctuary of the bedroom. I was on a podcast with a really, really bright lady, and we were talking about the sanctuary of the bedroom because I'm very passionate about the sanctuary of the bedroom, and I'll tell you why in a bit. And I told it, you have that cell phone on that night table. Your husband has a cell phone on his night table. You realize that for some people who are sensitive, particularly hypersensitive, that it influences the brain waves, the patterns of brain waves. In severe cases, we know that an RF signal can put you in a sleeping pattern while you're walking and vice versa. It takes alpha and shifts to beta. And so there's actually influence that occurs in extreme cases when you have cell phones. I was on a podcast with a very bright young woman, and I told her, get the tablet, cell phones off your nightstands. It can potentially interfere with your brain patterns, amongst other things. And she said, "Oh, thank you so much for that information. I really appreciate you helping me think that through." And about 2 weeks later, she calls me up and said, "Dan, I didn't believe a word you said." And my husband and I decided, well, let's just take it out of the bedroom and see what happens. And she said, for the first time in a long time, they actually slept through the night. So it really did influence her. And I know from experience, it does influence so many. And it's not just removing the potential interference of an RF signal in your room, like your laptop, your tablet. Certainly no routers. You don't route it in your room. In fact, even with a router, you want to turn it off at night with a $10 timer, so it's not on during the night when you're sleeping. And so you really do want to make sure you clean that environment as best you can, because as you point out, mitochondrial recovery is at night. It's not while you're awake in the day. And if you're not really sleeping properly, your little engines that power the human body are just simply not there. So it's a debilitating function that gets worse and worse if you don't try to maintain some caution about the exposures. But here's something I also talk about when you talk about a sanctuary. You really don't want to be looking at a monitor when you're about to go to sleep. And let me tell you why. When you're looking at a screen, one of the color components of the screen is a blue signal, a blue light that's entering into the eye. Believe it or not, that's part of how the body decides it needs to go to sleep or not. And so when you walk outside and it's sunny out, you're not tired. But when you go into a dark room and there's no light, you feel tired. Well, part of it is a cryptochrome protein that's sitting on the back of the eye. That is actually the little switch that opens up the melatonin and other functions of the body. So you don't want to be reading an hour before you decide to go to sleep, because if you sleep and you read and all of a sudden you say, I'm going to go to bed, you're not going to go to sleep
Right.
because the tryptophan protein hasn't turned on, basically. And so
Yeah.
you really do want to make sure that you have a good recovery cycle, and you minimize the exposures in your bedroom, because of the importance of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my husband and I, we have a pretty solid evening routine of like wind down, no
Yep.
phones in the bedroom. I mean, I wouldn't
Right.
say that it's perfect every once in a while.
Of
If I
course.
need to look something up, or, if we're like, actually last night, for example, we were planning a trip. We're going to Denver for a trip in June, and we were just looking at some hotels and just a couple resorts and
Yeah.
things. And it
Right.
was, shortly before bed, so it wasn't but that's not our everyday pattern, right? Like that's not something that's typical. You see and you hear people, they fall asleep with these phones, like they're listening to
Yeah.
something or they're
Oh,
watching.
absolutely.
Years ago, I mean, I was guilty of this 20 years ago. I had a TV in my bedroom, and I fell asleep to it every night, staring at the screen that made your eyes tired, so to speak.
Right.
Well, I think it just exhausted the brain. That's really what it did. But I have a question for you, and I don't know if you can answer it. I'm hopeful that you can, because this has been a burning question of mine for a very long time. Um, when you flip off onto airplane mode,
Right.
is that actually doing anything? Because some people say that it's not. And some people say, anyone who's ridden on an airplane, they're like, "Oh, put it in airplane mode." Well, I get text messages that come through on airplane mode. I've had phone calls come through on airplane mode. I've left my phone on airplane mode, particularly um, when I'm traveling. This is kind of where it's like, okay, some exceptions. I'm in a hotel, I'm at an event, whatever. It's like you're inundated by this stuff. I don't rely on the alarm clock or some wake up call at a front desk. I do put my phone on airplane mode, and I set my alarm so that I can get to my meetings on time. And I'm always thinking, like, is this still frying my brain at night, or is it turning anything off? What are your thoughts there?
So you are turning stuff off, and
Okay, good.
let me
Oh, thank
explain.
goodness.
Um, there's uh, when having in a connection to a cell tower, there's the transmit side of the cell phone and the receive side. So when you put it on um, a, um, a, a there are several things. There is the Bluetooth, there's the Wi-Fi, there's the
Mhm.
cell tower, and there's the GPS. There are actually four transmitters typically that are part of a cell phone. I personally only use the cell phone connection. I don't need the Wi-Fi. I don't need the Bluetooth,
Mm,
because those to me um, could be potentially harmful in the aggregate. And so I try not to have that. But when you put it into um, airplane mode, you're turning off the transmitter. So
okay.
you are preventing that. But what you're
Okay.
not doing is turning off the GPS. You are the
Oh,
Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, but not the GPS. And so
interesting.
there's a, a spurious transmission that occurs. And so that's why I just take it out of the room and I
Take it
don't
out of
worry
the
about it.
room.
And then when it rings in the middle of the night, I run.
Yeah, exactly. And then what about if you actually turn the device off? Is it like fully shut off, or is there
It is.
still stuff?
No,
Okay,
it's
there's
fully shut
nothing
off.
flying. So
Yeah,
if the phone was
exactly.
sitting on my nightstand and it was turned off,
You'd be fine.
nothing is activated on it.
Yep, you'll be fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Well, that clears that
So,
up. That's been a burning
by the
question of
way,
mine
that
for
sort of
years.
brings us around to, and we've talked around a lot. Um, um, the more transmitters you have in an environment, the potentially more harmful it can be.
Right.
So I talk about cell phones are like um, bees that have a stinger. One bee won't kill you, 1,000 will. So
Yeah.
as a practice, all you do is turn off the transmitters, take them out of the room, and then you're
Right.
safe. But you need to be aware of where those transmitters lie. And the more you turn off, and as I mentioned, my practice is turn them all off unless I need the one function. And that's how I always know I'm reducing the potential dangers. I may not be eliminating them completely, but I am reducing them.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've over the years, I've just kind of gone through, and I have this checklist on my website too, just general checklists. Like, think about all the smart devices. There are certain things
Yeah,
that you can't control, which
right.
would be like a smart meter on the exterior of your home. Like, I understand there's certain things, but smart TVs, even like baby monitors and things, like go back to some old school hardwired stuff, all this digital, you know, it's like I understand the convenience. You said something earlier. It's like, well, why did we do this? Well, because we all live in an Amazon Prime mindset world
Yeah,
now. We
right,
want things
exactly.
done right now, right now. So when you were talking about, oh, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to download this video and now it's done in seconds, it's like, where did we come from that we don't have 5 or 10 minutes, right? Like,
Right.
why did we,
Exactly.
like the trade-off is a brain tumor because I don't have 5 minutes
Yeah.
to wait for my Netflix show to download. Like, that's just bizarre to me. And that's why when it's like when you step back and you look at this as a whole, people are willing to sacrifice their health
Yes.
for convenience.
Right.
And I can't shout this loud enough from the rooftops from people. It's like you can you can pay for it now or pay for it later, right? Like,
You bet.
I mean, I had a stroke years ago and in my early 30s, and it was like the one of the biggest warning shots of my life. And
Right.
you spend a decade. I spent a decade. I mean, I'm still on, still it's like you can chase your health backwards. And that's what I think is what people are willing to do. It's like, oh, I'll deal with it when it comes up. Or you could be proactive and not have it become an issue. And so I just find it interesting that this information is available, right? Like this
Yeah.
information is widely known.
Yeah.
Our homes are full of these smart devices. People pay for convenience. They pay for these Alexas and all these devices that are always on, always listening, always available, but they really just don't understand the overall impact that it has. And my passion is teaching people, how do you live in a society, like how can you mitigate it and what can you do to what are some solutions to it? So I feel like you have something you want to say to it, but then I want to ask you about DefenderShield. You created this phenomenal product, and I know we like to dig in the weeds of the science and the information and stuff, but there are solutions. You've created
There is.
a few really, really great solutions. So I want you to speak to those as well. Say what you want to say first, and then tell me why
I will.
DefenderShield is so
But
amazing.
you were reminding me, when I wrote the book, I sent it to uh, a person that I work with on occasion. He's one of the smartest biochemists I've ever known, and he writes textbooks on the subject for years and years and years and years. And he's a X-ray expert as well. So he was really someone I wanted to read the book
Mm,
for his critique. And he said, Dan, I learned some things, but the fact is, you said if a woman puts a cell phone, if a 12-year-old puts a cell phone in their back pocket, it will potentially influence the egg of the child, 12-year-old child.
mhm,
And he said, Dan, I'm not really sure that that's real. And I said, well, science suggests it, right? And so there's clearly not enough evidence for us to know that that's the fact. But remember, distance is your friend. And when something's 4 foot away, you have very little concern over an RF signal. But when it's
mhm.
in your back pocket, it's 6 inches away from the egg. And so
Yeah.
that's when it can potentially be a problem. And so he gave me that feedback. And several years later, he mentioned to me that he had a woman, very young woman, had a stillborn child, and that there were two extremely strange mutated cancerous cells. Having one would have been a probability of almost zero. Having both was even less than zero. And he said, Dan, you may be right. The fact is, putting a cell phone in your back pocket as a 12-year-old, you do run the risk potentially of having damage that is a subtending generational damage, and we don't even realize it. And so what you're saying, and I'm agreeing with, is just be precautionary. Take a couple of things. It doesn't really cost you much, and it doesn't really make your life miserable. They're easy things to do, like putting a cell phone 4 foot away. That's all you got to do. Put it away from you enough, and you're really not going to have that influence. But don't keep it close to you. And when you choose to use a phone, use technology, use it minimal amount of time, not long periods of time. If you're a heavy user, multiple hours per day, you're 10 times more likely to have frontal lobe cancer than your neighbor that doesn't use it quite as much. So we know scientifically there's a lot of evidence about heavy duty use does accumulate and potentially can be serious in time. So
that's interesting because a lot of us, like, I don't put my phone to my head ever. I'm always on speakerphone, but it's like right here.
Yeah.
It's like within reach of me. And now that you're mentioning this 4 feet, I downloaded my, I get calls all day long through, people inquiring about saunas, whatever. I downloaded the app. I run my business stuff through an app now, and I downloaded it to my computer. So I literally could set my phone like, 4 to 6 feet away. And when a call comes in, I can still just answer it on my computer and speak. And I don't have to be anywhere near the frequency of the phone. So thank you for that, because I'm going to make that change today and just keep my phone like
just a little
over
bit
there on my windowsill.
In fact, the facts are when you're 1 to 2 foot away, almost 80% of the potential dangers are gone. By 4 foot, 98%. It's the function of the signal that's a fact about, right? So simple distance is a good thing, right? And turning stuff off.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably like a bigger conversation too, because so many people, have fear. They can't get too far from their phones because they're afraid they're going to miss something, or they're, scrolling or whatever. So it's like, this is a whole other conversation around why are we so tethered to these devices?
Exactly.
And like the bigger picture is disconnect, be willing to walk away from it. I mean, I run a business, so I have to have my phone on me, throughout the day for various reasons, not all the time, but like now, I mean, when I go for a walk or if I'm out, I leave my phone at home. I just don't take it with me. I don't need it on me unless I'm expecting a call or there's something time sensitive. But the more amount of time that we can leave it behind or not have it on us or even around us, it's not only good for the signal, but it's good for the brain, right? Like we have to disconnect from these devices to some degree. And I think that's why a lot of people are sleeping by them or with them, because they feel this connection to it and they think it needs to be nearby. That I think is, that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. And as you're pointing out, you're removing a stressor.
Yeah.
And just the very fact that you're moving it a distance, not using it very long, you're reducing the exposures that can be more serious to your health issues by simply taking simple actions. If you use it a lot and it's going to be near you, just the earbuds that you use, believe it or not, we took the acoustical approach where we took the electronics and converted it to an acoustical signal to the earbud, to the ear. And that eliminated any exposures to the head. It is a simple device.
I know. And I have to thank you for these actually, because they're a little coiled up now because I was traveling with them. So I put them on today. This was the first recording I did since I've been back from vacation. I was like, oh, these are a little wound up. Totally fine. But it's important because I don't want to, this directly into my head, so it's just one way that we can protect ourselves. And so I love them. They're great sound for one. And two, you take such specific, meticulous care and discernment on the products and the materials that you use to make these devices. And so can we talk a little bit? I know you've got phone cases, laptop shields, tablet shields, clothing, earbuds. What where do people start if they're feeling a little overwhelmed? Obviously, I think a phone case is probably a good place, but I'd like for you to speak a little bit about maybe what the more popular options are, or where could people start if they want to start making an investment into something like this?
Um, Believe it or not, one of the best products we have available is the earbuds.
Yeah.
Because for people who really want to talk on the phone a lot, you
Hmm.
can plug it into your cell phone and you're not getting exposed to any signals, and you can talk all you want.
Hmm.
And so it turns out that it's a product that actually fills an important hole. And you're right. I spent a long time making sure that fidelity was right. It took me over a
Yeah.
year to get the acoustics right. And we just wanted to make sure not only were we keeping you safe, but it sounds good as well. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I mean. We can all agree that the wellness world has blown up, which I
yeah,
think is fantastic in the sense that so many people are looking inward at their health and well-being, but it's also inundated with a lot of crafty marketing and gimmicky products.
right.
We all know that. It's like I think
Yeah,
that's also why people end up in the analysis paralysis because they're wondering, is this thing actually going to work? Now,
right.
your website, your information, I mean, it's loaded with all of the reasons and sufficient evidence as to why, but what makes Defender Shield different than others? And why would somebody, I don't say how can they trust this, but do you want to speak to that a little bit as far as
Yeah.
what I think you've already laid the groundwork as to why you're the expert in this for
Jen,
sure. But really, it's like I said, people ask me all the time, like, well, prove it. Why does it work?
in fact, I don't think you should trust me. I'm a cagey
Oh,
guy. And so,
well, that's what I like
um,
about you, Dan.
I actually went to test labs. I actually ran test labs, so I'm pretty familiar with how do you operate test labs. But
Yeah,
you can't trust me. Um, how do you know that I haven't doctored the studies that are on my products?
true.
So you actually need third-party independent testing to verify that you've in fact have the efficacy you're claiming. And so every product we have has been tested by an independent lab. Believe it or not, as a substantial differentiator with us is that we try to build technology evolving with the technology evolution. If we were to have stayed with the technology we use for shielding that we created 10 years ago, it would be passe because of 5G and
Mm.
6G. So we've been developing shielding for years and years with our partners. And today, the only way we get our technologies tested is by going to military laboratories. And we actually have studies from military laboratories because they deal with the very high frequency rates. And so
Right.
it's all third party. And you shouldn't really trust anybody who makes a claim about something, particularly as complex as an RF signal. Um,
Yeah.
and so you're right. A lot of people make a lot of claims,
Yeah.
but it's pseudoscience. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's dangerous, and I think that it's just as equally dangerous as these frequencies because, um, again, watching the evolution of how this, um, I think since COVID, and a few other specific milestones along the way have really caused people to question
Right.
what they're doing, and that's
Right.
great. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic, but on the same token, there's been opportunity for a lot of companies to hitch their wagon
Yep.
to some of this information
Yeah.
and sell it, be selling things all over the place that suggest it's doing something because they're not wrong. The science is there to support that these radiations need to be managed or mitigated. It's just, does their product actually work?
Exactly.
Does
And
their product actually do it? They're using marketing. I tell people this all the time when they call about saunas. It's like they're not wrong by saying infrared heat does this, this, and this, but does their sauna do this,
Right.
this, and this?
Exactly.
That's the question.
Yeah,
That is the
exactly.
question. And so when people take a step back and they're like, oh, maybe I need one of those, it's like, well, you probably need something, but what you want to dig in is like the reputation of the business, the
Right.
resources and the referrals, who's using it and why. I tell people, don't get caught up in the influencer world. Everybody's being sold something.
Yeah, exactly.
Really look at the data. And that's exactly why I wanted to speak with you today, Dan, is because your data doesn't lie, for one, but two, you've had such a unique opportunity to be on both sides of this
Yeah,
understanding
exactly.
so that you could legitimately create a solution to a problem or a situation and then had the resources and the third party testing to back it up. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for bringing such a thoughtful product line to the market space.
Well, I didn't intend to do that, but unfortunately I did. It just kept
These
on.
unintended, these
Yeah,
unintended
it's like it
businesses that
was
pop up.
like there was so much misinformation. In fact, out of sheer frustration, I wrote the book because it was facts that was public, no one knew about. And so there needed to be a framework for understanding what it is this area looks like. What does science know? What do we know about the evolution of technology? And what are the things we can do about it?
Yeah.
And there are things we can do. They're simple. They're effective. And there's enough evidence that suggests if you're are using any device close to you that has a transmitted signal, you look for protection when you're using it.
Yeah.
In fact, we haven't talked about this, but um, there is, you've heard me say it, electromagnetic hypersensitivity. That's where if you go near a router or you use a cell phone closely, you get foggy thinking, you get anxiety. There's a lot of symptoms that are amplified if you're electric hypersensitive. The body's not recovered because it didn't sleep well that night, and so the resilience is not necessarily there. And when they get a toxin that is actually attempting to penetrate the body's reacting to it. And electric hypersensitive is the thing. When I started doing this stuff, 15 to 20% of the population in some studies showed that they were electric hypersensitive. They got headaches. All the eye strains, all the visual stuff that I was talking about. And so, and of that, Jen, 80% were women. It was like statistics that no one knows about, but it's no question about it. A woman was more likely to walk by a router and feel something that she doesn't fully understand. It's because they're electric hypersensitive. I've seen more recent studies that showed up to 50%, which I don't believe. I don't think it's that pervasive. In January this year, there was a very large study that was done, a meta study, peer review study over 3 countries, and it showed the rough range of 10 to 15% of the population is really affected. So when you get a headache and you look and you see you're right next to a router, that could be the reason. Some people know more than others, but it's not unusual that at least 10% of us are going to feel something when we get close to a router.
Yeah. I think routers are something, and again, I harp on this a lot. It's like people need to understand where those are in your home and get them the farthest away from, especially kiddos' bedrooms. I don't know
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
everyone, of course, where they're living. The other thing that's challenging too is when you live in a condo building or an apartment building, or you live in a very close proximity to where you can't control
Right.
what those where those frequencies are. Apartment homes are really, something because you have a high concentration of a lot of frequencies all into one space. And so trying to protect yourself and mitigate through that. But being aware of where the router is in your home and like you said, turning it off, at night, as well as just, are you exposed to it all day? Like my router's actually in my office here. I do things to help mitigate, and it's the furthest away from me possible. But that's the reality, is it's in my
Right.
office. That's where it comes into the home, so
Exactly.
it's not that you have to throw everything out the window. It's just like work around, go through every room of your home, create a checklist of how can I sharpen this, right? Like what can I do to create a more peaceful sleep environment, and what can I do to mitigate my exposure when it's something I can't escape from, right? Like
Right.
during the day or during business hours or such. So, Dan, I think, like I said, I feel like you and I could just talk for days on this. This is a topic that never gets old to me, and I'm so incredibly. It like actually hurts my heart sometimes to think about how people are searching for answers in their health. They don't understand why they have headaches, these rashes, why they're not sleeping, and insomnia, and cancer rates at such low ages. Like, why is this stuff popping up? I truly believe a lot of it has to do with these frequencies that we're being pinging at us all day long. So I just want to say thank you again for spending time with me today to really take a thoughtful deep dive into this topic and ways in which people can manage their life. And again, I know we talked about DefenderShield, the products and things. All of the information will be in the show notes for people to find your website and your book and all of your social platforms and things like that. You guys are it's loaded with information, fantastic science and study there as well. So thank you again for joining me today.
Jen, thanks for inviting me. I really did appreciate this. Thanks so much.
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Dan. We'll talk again soon. Okay, friends and fellow wellness warriors, thanks for tuning in today. If this show was helpful and inspired you, please head over to Apple or Spotify to rate, review, subscribe, and follow us, as well as share it with your friends and family. It's a fantastic way to grow the show, expand my reach, and teach others how to create a vibrant life they love. If you're ready to invest in your health and purchase a Clear Light sauna, hop on over to jenhellerlifestyle.com and send me a note. Thanks again for tuning in. I love you. I'm grateful for you, and I thank you so much for your support. You are the reason I do this work. You are the reason I do this show. And you are the reason I get up every single day with a burning desire in my soul. Cheers to your health and happiness, my friends. We'll see you next week. This podcast is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you think you have a medical condition, consult your licensed physician.